These tapes were made purely for the purpose of going over the entities of Silas Orion, aka Dr.Nowhere. They're designed to simulate day-to-day living and survival should a breach in this reality occur. Simply view the files, learn the entities, and use as you see fit. Oh, one more thing. Don't accept any video calls. The Locust has... On a typical day, people may either find themselves inside on a device or outside enjoying the fresh air. But recently, a few anomalies have been appearing more and more often, using television and electricity waves to enter homesteads and the mind of their victims, or worse, using mass spreading methods in order to infect their victims via the air. Imagine this, it's a simple night after work, watching TV alone when suddenly the broadcast changes with no input from yourself or the remote in general. The remote still sits on the table in front of you, and on your screen is something you have never seen before. It's horrifically mangled and speaks in a language you don't understand. But thankfully, you eventually just return to your normal show. This event, known as Broadcast 813, is likely the work of Phenomenon or Fen 228, which is one of the first creatures and probably the most known of Nowhere's abominations. And today it's going to be the front runner of our virus class. But in case you guys are unfamiliar with the Trevor Henderson video and you guys don't know what that means, I used many different classifications in order to group large amounts of entities that have similar mechanics together. And these tapes are no different. But this time I'm going to be including a bonus at the end because rather than being one distinct entity, it is more closer to three, making it one of the most dangerous. Now, as the case was before, a lot of these entities we don't have much on other than simply a couple images and maybe a few excerpts, but we can use these observations in order to make an assumption on whether it would be better to look to eliminate these things or to avoid them entirely. And if you did come into contact with them, how would you escape them? The Fen 228 effect, also known as locked-in syndrome, which is not as raw as it sounds. Rather than being extremely focused, you're more like extremely dead, or mostly at least. Your body enters a pseudo-coma state and you are unable to move. Well, all except your eyes. But to be honest, you're probably gonna wish they stayed shut, as the being from the TV, you know, the mangled looking thing, will now begin to manifest itself in front of you and around you, following you waking up. Now, according to some of the logs that I've read, Fen 228 has a lot to do with the mental effect that is gained by the memory of its face and the auditory rendition of its message that came over the TV. Now, in most situations, I would just tell you to get rid of all the TVs in your house, but I've said that a lot of times before, and it's just not very practical because no one wants to live like that. But you don't really want to live paralyzed while this thing torments you either. So what is the solution here? Instead, you're going to want to prepare a Boils 1 contingency set, or in layman's terms, a way to temporarily shut off your senses as to not expose yourself to him. My best recommendation is to sit with a pair of shooting range headphones that are designed to keep your ears safe and basically cut out all outside noise. Then, that way, if anything goes wrong with your programming, you can simply look away and put the headphones on for a minimum of about an hour, just to be safe. And if you're really still worried, you can simply just make your way behind the television and unplug it from the wall. If you do somehow fail this step and manage to see it, the wiki leads me to believe that Psalms 91:10 line from the Bible that is mentioned in the video has special properties against this entity for one reason or another, along with specific lines that you're supposed to write down on paper. And as a plan B for if you're really desperate, you could always find a last minute place that could attempt a sort of hypnosis that would make you forget its face. I don't know if that actually works, but I mean, if you're desperate, you might as well try. Despite the Boiled One being a sort of a relatively easy fix, our next entity could care less on whether you hear it or not. The Locust is going to be the next in our virus category. Now, it seems Dr.Knowhere is currently building on these entities, so there may be plenty of updates in the future, but from our assumptions so far, the Locust will enter your home through accepting direct contact like video calls or phone calls. When it does, it'll slowly break through the glass and eat the victim's insides using unknown methods. While the wiki does state breaking the TV would work to survive, I could not find a confirmation that these methods would be canon by Dr.Knowhere himself, so I'm going to go off the assumption that breaking the TV logically would just make its job easier, as that's what it's trying to do in order to get out of the TV. So I don't see why you would just do that for it, especially since the locust is extremely fast and good at finding you wherever you hide. So if it does get out and you're not ready for it, let's just say you're gonna have a bad time. In my opinion, your best bet would be to use the fact that it only has one area to come out of to your advantage and set a trap for it. And by that, I don't mean just, get ready to attack it with something, because it's 13 feet tall and you probably would not win that fight. Instead, you're gonna wanna somehow find a way to make a puddle of water with an electrical current funneling into it from a power source of your choice, as it is biomechanical, meaning part flesh, part machine. So this should find a way to stun it momentarily. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if you look closer, the thing behind it seems to look like a beating heart. And I'm hoping that shooting something into it, like an arrow, bullet, or even something sharp that is a bit of a distance, like a spear, could likely kill the locust by piercing this heart, or at least deter it enough to give you enough time to get in a car, which you could likely use to drive away. But if you're unable to do this in time, I do agree that turning off the TV or unplugging it would be a decent backup plan as well. Now, cone zones are going to be another mental phenomena that appears mostly to people in wards. Now, these things may appear silly or harmless, but they're anything but, and they actually use their appearance as a way to lure you into their trap. As if you look at them or interact with them in any way, shape, or form, your insanity will accelerate at a rate that soon your brain will essentially just be gone. Now, to prevent this, you're going to want to close your eyes if they appear. Take deep breaths and tell yourself that they are not real and that you are still where you were before. Ignore any words you hear and try to carefully maneuver away from them once you become grounded, looking at the floor and avoiding accidental viewing if possible. Our final entity in this section is known as the fungus. The fungus is an entity that specializes in spreading spores through the air that, when inhaled, actually grows a mushroom-like appendage out of the closest neck or other appendage, splitting the old one apart in the process, as it quote-unquote incubates at a rapid pace. This would be a devastating outcome that would rival any modern apocalypse, as the more of these mushrooms that are sprouting out of people, the more spores are going to spread. Now, the solution to this would hopefully be as simple as keeping a large doses of antifungal medicine on you at all times in order to slow or prevent whatever incubation process from happening inside of you and transforming you into one of these things, along with wearing an intricate filter mask so at least you don't accidentally breathe these things in. At least I would assume that's how you contract it, and not just them sprouting out of your skin, which is a whole new level of disturbing. In that case, you would need to create an environment that makes fungus growth impossible, using mostly UV radiation and an excess amount of sunlight, along with keeping your skin as dry as possible, so if this does happen, it wouldn't be a problem. You're also probably going to want to replace all your house lights with UV lamps, and in my opinion, the mixture of taking these antifungals and using dehumidifiers to dry out the air would make an infection impossible. The key for this is simply identifying when the spores have become widespread, and often this is going to be obvious, as they can grow to unfathomable lengths and you'll probably see them in the sky. So the virus class doesn't really follow any traditional limitations and can be everywhere and also nowhere at once. See what I did there? Anyways, I think it deserves at least a 9 on the "you're fucked" scale, as many of these could probably cause an apocalypse by itself. Okay, good. You guys are still here. Hopefully by now you've realized the severity of this situation and locked yourself inside your house. However, that wouldn't be the end of it. Not even close. Similar to the kidnapper class in my Trevor Henderson video, there is also a class that prioritizes getting inside of your house and making your life a living hell no matter where you are. There are probably many that possess this quality, but I just chose the top 5 as they are, in my opinion, the most disturbing and dangerous. Each of these entities seem to specialize at a different part of the house, so I'm going to be going over each part so you can be sure. Now, before entering any of your bathrooms, you're going to want to make sure to listen for any sort of breathing or even the slightest traces of a voice underneath the door. You may also be able to see a glowing white light. If this is the case, do not enter until daylight, as it might be guilt, also referred to as the boy, a manifestation of negligence, and as the name implies, the guilt of unknown parents that are theorized to have let it die sometime in the past. I would assume that if it isn't given enough attention, it would likely leave on its own. Father Harvest hides in cramped staircases or other small dark areas. It is slow but moves towards you nonetheless with an insatiable hunger. This one appears to possess an unknown amount of power, and if it appears, I suggest moving far away, as at least then it would take a while to reach you. As you can probably assume, as it gets night, it's going to become worse and more deadly, as the follower makes the fear that most people had as a kid, and the one I do as a 20-year-old, a reality. You know, when you're scared to turn off that light before you run upstairs or down the hallway into your room because you're afraid that whatever was hiding out might jump out and run you down? Well, this is that something. Now I'm going to recommend dealing with the follower how I dealt with this problem IRL, by essentially getting a motion light that turns on whenever it feels movement. That way it'll turn off automatically and you have no need to do any of this in the first place. But despite this, you are going to want to still be quick, as if you saw the image of what its full body likely looks like, you're not going to want to take any chances. After you've made it to your room, it's not quite time to relax yet, because it may be infested with something known as a flesh bed. These were originally found at a random mattress warehouse, but have assumably been around for much longer. They were originally given to a neighborhood that needed them, or simply sold at a discount at thrift stores. However, despite looking identical to random mattresses at first, they were indeed parasites in disguise, and led to a huge decline of the population in that area that ended up with them. Sometimes you can sleep on a mattress folk for months before it awakens and absorbs you into it. This directly correlates with the room's temperature, which, if it's too hot, such as in the summer, it can detect that there is body heat on it, allowing it to enter its metamorphosis and come out of its dormancy. When these creatures were discovered, they were found with hundreds of human bones inside, as they shift from target to target over assumably long periods of time. Temperatures can shift while you aren't paying attention, and it honestly would not be worth the risk. Now, you are going to be able to detect these things by cutting a small slit so you can see the inside of the mattress, as they only technically look like a mattress on the outside. On the inside, they have a whole skeletal structure, muscle structure, and various flesh and bones. So you're going to want to be checking that nightly to make sure that it doesn't feel too warm to be a normal mattress, as well as having something undesirable inside. And if you discover that this is the case, I suggest getting rid of it as soon as possible, using a fan to keep it dormant, and of course, don't sleep on it even for a little amount of time. Finally, we have the last and most dangerous creature on our list in this category, a demonic creature known as If the Spyman is no longer present, it is because it likely has found another target, but be aware at all times. The Trespasser class is dangerous but manageable, as if there's technically millions of houses to choose from, if you just get up and move, it would be much easier for them to just move on to your neighbor. So I think 6 is going to be a fair place in my opinion. Now that you've avoided the viral threats along with the threats that you're going to be finding inside your home, our next class is going to be a class above the rest that is all different in their own ways. And by that I mean they seem to follow their own reality entirely. Meaning you can never quite understand how they work, when they would show up, or how to avoid them. But I can still do my best to try. Like I said, these things could appear anywhere, be it the door on the way to work, in the locker rooms at school, or simply just closing at the store you work at. You're never going to truly know. Lucky enough, we only have 3 in this class for now, and since we recently just discussed flesh beds, I'll go over empty.3, or the dream entity. Now, we don't know an insane amount about this entity, but Dr.Knowhere's official post states, "I cannot move, I cannot speak. It's been anywhere from 16 minutes to 33,000 years. This repeats, but with longer frames each time." Now, my guess is that this entity can physically trap you in your dreams, making a simple 8-hour rest feel like an eternity. You walk through a bizarre room until you end up at this doorway where it will appear and torment you, as you are forced to listen, unable to do anything. As I mentioned before, we cannot really understand this being or how it works. If you're unfamiliar, dreams happen in the 3rd phase of dreaming, also known as REM sleep, where your brain is awake but at the same time not, letting you have your dreams. It is almost impossible to prevent dreams, but studies show that you can prevent remembering them by not talking about or writing dreams down in any way, shape, or form, along with sleeping on your back or stomach. And from personal experience, I've noticed that not oversleeping or using melatonin before bed, as this makes your dreams more vivid at times. And if you do somehow end up in this limbo, try to shock yourself awake as to not feel stuck in there for years. However, MT3 is described as not as forgiving as it used to be, so to be honest, I don't think it's going to let you do that. So you may have to take drastic measures, such as doing things that you would never even think about doing in real life, such as running directly towards it or into the dark while in the dream to scare yourself out. Philbus is an odd creature that, while not necessarily being able to kill you, forces you to follow Philbism, which is essentially a religion that convinces your mind that it is not only somehow possible, but a positive experience to eat wooden furniture, specifically chairs. And I shouldn't have to explain why that's not a good idea. It is unknown where it came from or why specifically wooden chairs. But the best way to avoid this is to avoid purchasing these in the first place so that you won't be able to attempt to eat them against your prior judgment when you're in one of these trances that are caused by coming into contact with Philbus's ads or any form of his media. Kind of like the way you would avoid buying sweets or unhealthy foods to avoid eating it on impulse. Finally, we have the Ankh-Lager, which seems to be a fucked up version of an angel that will appear in front of people who have committed egregious acts and will temporarily bring you to your knees and determine if you regret your actions. If you don't, they will burn you to death as punishment. And for this, there seems to be only one way out, and that is to not be a horrible person, and if you do come into contact with one, admit what you did to it and be as genuine as possible, otherwise you don't stand a chance. Cosmic entities can never be really understood, and therefore not survive truly, and therefore there's never really a guaranteed survival. You can only really pray you never encounter them, so to me they reach an easy 10. Finally, we have the Sight class entities. Now, similar with the Trevor Henderson video, yes, you don't need to come here, but let's say you're on a vacation somewhere like Egypt or the Bahamas and you happen to run into one of them. Here's what you would need to do. Starting with the obelisks, which are essentially these gigantic pillars of infinite knowledge that are found only in the most uninhabitable places on Earth and the moon, and while you likely would never run into them on purpose, they do possess the ability to emit an almost angelic sounding noise to lure you towards them. Do not follow this noise despite the curiosity it entails, as their noise is actually their knowledge being spewed outwards to whoever listens, and if you get too close, you will eventually learn too much, and your brain will shut down, leading to what's left being absorbed into the string of human flesh that is leading from it into the sky. So very similar to the boiled one, you're going to want to put on earplugs if you hear this call, and leave the vicinity as soon as possible, usually heading south, as most of these things do point north. The Curse of Wheatfields Avenue is the name designated for a string of disappearances that happened off the road by that name, assumed to be from this entity. So if you find yourself driving near this field, you're going to want to make sure that your brights are on and you keep an eye out for anything that might seem off. And no matter what, never get out of your car, even if it breaks down, as this area does possess a large amount of police security footage, as there was many disappearances that happened here, putting it on a sort of watch list for a certain amount of time. So it's likely that even if you do have any problems, there will be police to escort you out in a safe manner that wouldn't add you to that list. Finally, we have the watchtowers, a disturbing and rare entity that disguises itself as water towers and other tall structures in order to observe people from where they would never expect, and that no one would ever believe. They are said to commune with one another and can cause extreme distress and paranoia to whoever they are targeting, causing an intense fear to even go outside or perform even the simplest functions. Their overall purpose is mostly unknown, but it is assumed the easiest way to avoid them targeting you is to pretend that they don't exist. Don't show any reaction if you notice their eye, and do this as long as possible, as they will likely move on to somebody else. But since these three aren't technically as dangerous as anything prior due to their stationary and situational nature, I'm going to be ranking the Sight class at a 2. Now for our bonus entity. Well, it's not exactly an entity at all, rather an entire fake reality. Similar to ours, it does contain plants, living organisms, and the remains of what seems like a broken civilization. But the main difference you would notice is the creatures known by the Breathmen. The Breathmen reside mostly in the headless microcosm and have only appeared to cross into ours on a few noticeable occurrences. They can be human-sized or so tall that it is described as unfathomable. They appear dead and will frequently stand as still as statues, possessing no movement other than random breathing and chest convulsions emanating from their form of a heart. But despite this, I have a theory that these are the whole reason that humans become ripped into their reality in general. The symptoms begin with bizarre dreams that get more and more vivid until eventually you wake up in the macrocosm, rather than in our reality. A few thousand humans have ended up and now reside there, and they do what they can. But under no circumstances should you touch or interact with any of these beings, as they are thought to want to become you, and they will remove your head from your body and wear it into your home. In order to survive this, try not to recall the initial dream at all, don't talk about it, write it down, or even remember it, as this could cause it to reoccur. Try to fall asleep under normal circumstances and not in odd location or times, as most people that end up there remember falling asleep quote unquote under odd circumstance. And if you do end up there, it is unknown exactly how you would escape, but you would likely be able to live your life relatively normally as long as you stay far clear of the breath vent.